This is episode 53 of the Fitness and Post podcast. To access the show notes for this episode, please visit fitnessandpost.com/53. We are currently seeking sponsors who would like to join the Fitness and Post revolution and bring health and wellness back into post-production. So if you'd like to get your product or message in front of a highly target audience of editors, assistants, and other post professionals, please reach out to me at contact@fitnessandpost.com. My name is Zach Arnold, and I'm the creator of Fitness and Post. You may know me as Empire Editor on Twitter. I spent the last 10 years working long hours in a dark room and battled numerous health problems because of my less than ideal work environment. And that's what led me to building Fitness and Post. Whether you work in film and television post-production like me, or you're a designer, programmer, or anyone working a sedentary job all day, we bring you the practical tips, tools, and resources to bring health and wellness back into your life. You spent all day fixing it in post, now it's time to Fitness in Post. Hello and welcome to the Fitness and Post podcast, where it is my mission to share the best resources that I can find to help you optimize the best operating system that you have, yourself. My guest today is Wes Plate, a freelance editor and founder of the beloved software company Automatic Duck. Wes's journey to health began in earnest several years ago after undergoing hospital treatment for alcohol abuse. Now 70 pounds lighter and still alcohol-free, Wes has discovered a love for running and just completed his first 50K race. And for those not so good with unit conversions, that's over 30 miles. In our conversation, we talk about his background working in post as both an editor and software developer. We discuss the path that led him to becoming an alcoholic and ballooning to over 240 pounds, and then the experience that changed his whole life. If his story doesn't inspire you to take action in your life, I honestly don't know what will. But before we get to our interview, I wanted to let you know about a few announcements. First of all, there's been a lot of very heated discussion recently in the Fitness and Post Facebook group about the hours that we work and the way that we as post professionals are treated in this industry. I would love to hear your opinion and have you join the discussion as well. So come join us at fitnessandpost.com/Facebook. Anyone working in the post-production industry is welcome to join this private group. Secondly, thank you to all of my listeners who are using the special Amazon link to make all of your Amazon purchases. You are literally helping me keep the lights on for Fitness and Post, and I am eternally grateful for your support. For those of you that are not using our special Amazon link yet, here's how it works. All you have to do is visit fitnessandpost.com/Amazon. That's it. Super simple. This will redirect you to the Amazon homepage, and Amazon will then donate 5% of your purchase to the Fitness and Post program, and you literally don't pay a cent. So if you enjoy the show and hope to hear more episodes in the future, please write yourself a reminder to bookmark fitnessandpost.com/Amazon as your new Amazon homepage. And thank you for your support. And now, without further ado, my interview with Wes Plate. I am here today with Wes Plate, and if his story today does not inspire you, then I highly advise you to go see your physician and check to make sure that you have a pulse, because Wes's story is pretty amazing. So Wes, thank you so much for being on the show.
It's an honor, Zach. Thanks for inviting me.
So you and I have met a couple of times. We've had lunch together. We've chatted. You were actually in one of my very early test challenge groups for Fitness and Post. So we've kind of gotten to know a little bit each other more through cyberspace than in real space. Anybody that's been in the post-production industry for more than a few years, you may not have heard of Wes, but I pretty much guarantee that you've probably used a product that he has created called Automatic Duck. So let's just talk a little bit first about kind of who you are, what you do in the industry, what your background is, and then we'll get to what's so cool about the most recent part of your journey.
Sure. I started out as a editor back in the mid-90s. I was editing on Avid, and I was an offline editor, which was a distinction that was common back then. I think that's less so these days. But I was an Avid offline editor that was frequently doing complex effects jobs that required me to sort of have maybe some rough green screens or various things. The challenge I often had was that my advertising agency clients would kind of put up a bit of a fit if they saw a really rough chroma key. And I would explain, this is just Avid offline, this is AVR 77 or whatever the video quality was back then. And Avid doesn't key very well. So don't worry, we're going to finish this all in a really expensive room and it's all going to look really good. And they're like, okay, that's fine, but we don't like the chroma key. It looks really bad. So I would very frequently need to take my effects work that I was doing just for my offline cut, send it over to After Effects so that I could get something that looked a lot better. And then the agency people would always then buy off on my cut, and then the work would get redone later on. But I was always tripping over this roadblock of getting from my Avid into After Effects and yet doing it in an efficient manner, because it wasn't very efficient. It took a long time and a lot of rebuilding from scratch and taking a lot of notes about what I had done. And I got myself a pretty good workflow in the end, but it was still time consuming. So I had this idea that if there was a plugin for After Effects that could read an Avid OMF file, like that little piece of magic could do all the work that I'd spent hours on. So I went to my dad, who at the time was the only programmer I knew, and I said, I've got this idea. I don't know if it's possible, but I think it might be. And this was in like 98, 99 timeframe that I went to him to discuss this idea. And then kind of life got in the way, various things happened. And finally, by the end of 2000, I think it was October of 2000, we really got started on the project in earnest. We created a plugin for After Effects that would read an Avid timeline through this file format called OMF. And then in 2001, NAB, we did our very first trade show, and we had a company that we called Automatic Duck. And it was just the start of what became now it's going on 14 years, but a very long journey of us creating tools that helped video editors and other digital artists get their work between different programs that didn't all by themselves talk well to each other. So we were sort of this Switzerland of helping all these different apps that didn't necessarily get along to help them get along in a way that users could work with them. And so that's kind of how Automatic Duck happened. It came out of my out of my life as an actual video editor, needing something that didn't exist, and we were just sort of at the right place at the right time for that.
So clearly nowadays, all of the programs that are in the world of editing and post-production, they all talk together perfectly. So there's no need for any type of automatic duck translation program. Would that be correct?
God, I wish.
Right? Because you think about what life looked like 15 years ago. We thought it was so complicated. But if you got into a time machine and came to today, you'd be like, are you flipping kidding me? With all the formats and the deliverables and the number of cameras and the number of codecs and the number of NLEs, like everything is just exponentially multiplied. So this is easily one of the largest pain points for so many people, especially those that wear multiple hats. It's not a pain point for me because all I do is cut for 60 hours a week. That's it. I'm in an Avid timeline and I edit, but I'm very specialized, and that's now a very unique place to be in this industry. So it seems to me that this is just something that now that you have all this experience for years would be even more useful today rather than less useful.
Yeah, I think you're right. Certainly there has been some things that have worked. Some of these apps have started to get some better integrations built in. For example, Premiere Pro has the ability to import an AAF file from an Avid in a much better, more robust way than it used to in the past. And that has been a higher priority for Adobe lately than it had been. So, I mean, there is that kind of improvement in the industry, but at the same time, there's also huge gaps, that other NLEs you can't get to, we recently came out with a new plugin that went from Final Cut 10 to After Effects because I was starting to use Final Cut 10, and I had that same sort of stumble, like, hey, I need to get to After Effects. So that thing didn't exist, and so Automatic Duck has filled that one. But there's every time somebody comes up with a new NLE or a new compositing system or a new digital audio workstation, there's always some new gap, and it's like, you can't have one standard that seems to work for everybody. It is kind of maddening that that a company like ours needs to still exist in today.
You'd think so, right? It's like, can't we all just get along? Like, come on. Like, there's got to be an answer, but we complicate things further as opposed to making them simpler. So it's kind of nuts. So I'm very appreciative that you're able to help fill some of those gaps and have been doing it for so long. But obviously, the reason that I'm bringing you on today is not so much to talk about technology, because there are plenty of other podcasts that do that. But I want to talk specifically about health and wellness, because you have a really inspiring story. But what I want to do is start from the beginning. And obviously, based on the conversation that we've had so far, you're somebody that's obviously very much into the technology world, into the post-production world. So tell me, when you started Automatic Duck 15 years ago, what did your life look like from a health perspective?
Oh boy. So I got to set that time machine and go back. I was a younger man back then. How old was I? I'm not even good at doing math. I can't figure out how old I am right now. Well, anyway, I was somewhere in my mid to late 20s. I can't even remember, 27 maybe. The thing I remember most strongly about my health at that time was that I was getting more and more unhealthy, while yet somehow being aware of it, at least enough to wish that it wasn't happening, while at the same time making decisions and making choices that took me further down the path. I can remember, working as an editor, the only way I could possibly take a break without feeling like a real jerk was if I went out to have a cigarette. That seemed like the industry approved. Oh, you can have a cigarette? Okay, you can take a break then, no big deal. But if it was like, I just need to get out of the room from you, crazy client, that was frowned upon. So I was smoking cigarettes at the post facility, not a lot, but just enough to get out of the room once in a while. After work, I would go drink with my boss and other fellow artists. So there was a lot of alcohol involved in my life. I can also remember, as Automatic Duck was starting, working well late into the night. And then, it's at 2 o'clock in the morning. My brain is just really going, because we've been thinking so hard all day. But I've got all these great ideas and I can't go to sleep. So I would drink myself to sleep. That was even yet more alcohol on top of everything else. And so I was just starting to get heavier and heavier as I was increasing my caloric intake and just being generally not moving around a lot. Now, at the same time, I can remember having some thoughts like, this isn't going in the right direction. Because when I was in high school, I was as a sprinter in track. I also did cross country. I wasn't very good at cross country, but it was something that I did to get me through that season as I got ready for track. I really enjoyed sprinting. So in high school, I was in pretty decent shape. But then once, even in college, I was in pretty decent shape. But once I turned 21 and I had easy access to going to Costco and buying huge cases of beer, I started to run a lot less and exercise a lot less. And my weight went up. So when I was, then professional, doing all this alcohol infused lifestyle and just generally being not a lot of exercise, I wished I was able to do more exercise. And so once in a while, I would try to go for a run, try to recapture that spirit of my youth. But it was hard because I was so heavy. And so it was a non-starter so many times because I just couldn't get any momentum. And I could just, it just was just snowballing on itself, just getting worse and worse and worse. And I think was it in 2007, that's when I think I got to my heaviest point. I was like 240 pounds. I don't think I got to 245, but I know I was definitely over 240. And I was just a very big person. And I actually had lost a bunch of weight when I got married in 2000 well, maybe it was 2000. So right around the time Automatic Duck started, I actually had lost some weight just because of the wedding. I didn't want to look awful in the wedding pictures. But then a lot of that went right back on as soon as that little diet stopped. So I was definitely in this cycle of just so much bad stuff going in and not enough exercise and good things happening. And but I can also remember really wishing it was different, but it was so hard to get out of that rut.
So really what you've done is you've painted a very clear picture that you are somebody that at one point in your life, you had fairly good health when you were younger. Then all of a sudden you hit that point where you feel like you're invincible, you're 21, you're 22, you've just gotten out of school. You feel like nothing's going to change me. I'm on top of the world. I can hit the beer. I can work until 3 o'clock in the morning. Caffeine is going to keep me going, whatever it is. And all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're like, how the hell did I get to be 240 pounds? And I think this is a really good lesson for people that are listening, because I know that I have a fair amount of listeners that are in our age demographic, but there are also a lot of listeners that are younger. And I would give anything to have a time machine and go back to when I just graduated school and start hearing stories like these, because I've never had an issue with weight. I mean, I've been heavy and I'm actually a little bit heavier now than I would like to be, but I've never been over 200 pounds. So I've never been obese. But my struggle, which I've made very public, has always been depression and anxiety. And I thought I was bulletproof when I came out of college. And it only took 2 or 3 years of working in this industry to basically break me down to suicidal depression and not understanding how that happened. So I think hearing your story and where you started and knowing that you weren't just quote unquote the fat kid that got picked on, that's a really good thing for people to hear, because you started in a good place, went to a really, really bad place, and then came out of that, which we'll go to next. But I think that's a good lesson to take out of this so far, is that you went down this path based on choices that you made when you were still relatively young.
Yeah, and I think that was always in the back of my mind, was this idea that how can I get back to that place where I used to be? And certainly I had that desire to get back to it. I didn't have the ability to overcome my dependencies and my addictions at the time. So it was a real struggle, and I wasn't able to do it. But eventually, I got there.
Yeah, and the other thing that I want to mention too, that I think this is one of the things that literally makes my blood boil when I think about this, is when you said that, well, the only approved break in post-production is the smoke break. And my head just wants to explode, literally, that I can't even emphasize how frustrated that makes me, because it's so backwards, where you're just perpetuating the bad health by saying, well, yeah, okay, well, he's on a smoke break, so that's fine. But I feel guilty because I want to take a 15-minute break to walk around the block. And it's like, well, that's not efficient. You should be in front of your workstation pounding away at the keyboard, Mr. Keyboard Monkey, right? I literally felt that way today, right? Like, I'm buried in dailies. I'm doing studio network notes on a previous cut. I'm juggling all this stuff. We can't move our calendar because I'm literally in dailies on a show that's going to air in like a month. And I'm thinking, I need to get out of this room. I'm going to go crazy if I'm stuck in this 12 by 12 dark room for another 10 minutes. But there's this pit in my stomach saying, oh my God, I hope somebody doesn't knock on my door and see that I'm not there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And that mindset just has to change. And the fact that you felt the same way, but the solution was, well, as long as I'm smoking, then it's okay, right? But that's common. Like, that's not an uncommon way to think.
Yeah, it's crazy that that's the way that was. Yeah, there was the way then, and it is now still that way. It's unbelievable. So yes, keep railing against that one.
Yeah, and that's something that I really want to rally everybody that's listening to this show to help me change, because I can't do it by myself. But if we have more and more people just kind of say, enough is enough. If I want to leave at 6 o'clock because I'm done, I'm not going to feel guilty about it. If I want to walk away for 15 minutes and get some air and I'm not going to smoke a cigarette, I'm going to be okay with that too. And if one person does it and then another person does it and then another person does it, then guess what? Producers are just going to have to accept the fact that editors need to get out and see sunshine like everybody else in the world. And then they can stop making jokes about how we're all white, even though we're all very white and pasty, myself included. All right, so one thing that really struck me about your story, not what you've mentioned so far, but is the way that you and I met and the way that our friendship developed, is I didn't know anything about your past being heavier. And I remember you were in the challenge group with me, and we had lunch together, and you were just kind of talking about your story, and you were kind of struggling with sticking with the fitness stuff, but you're trying to do some more running and do 5K and a 10K. But then you randomly posted a picture on Facebook, and this was maybe 6 months to a year ago, of your old driver's license. Not to me, just in public, and I happened to find it. And I said, oh my God, where in the world did this guy come from? Because it was the picture of you at 240 pounds and I didn't even recognize you. So that was when the light switch kind of went on in my head where I said, all right, this guy's figured something out and I want to know what it is that was going on in his head that got him to where he is today, meaning a year ago. And now where you are tonight as opposed to where you were then is another completely different journey. So let's go back to where you were at 240 pounds. You were drinking and you were smoking and literally drinking yourself to sleep and working until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, not able to slow your brain down. What was the turning point? What was the psychological trigger that made you say something's got to change? Because there was obviously the nagging thoughts of like, oh, I know I can do better. I know I should exercise. But whenever I speak to people or I read books about people's journeys, there's always a specific trigger or event. So was there one for you where all of a sudden it was like, all right, this is it. I've got to change?
Yeah, unfortunately, there was a bit of a dramatic evening that unfortunately I don't even remember. But what I do know about it is that it was, I believe it was the day after Christmas, or maybe it was Christmas, 2007. And by this time in my life, the drinking thing had been significant and like professionally on, like I was hardcore for quite some time, and it was matching up perfectly with problems in my marriage. And so any frustrations that I happened to have with my wife, they were so much easier for me to elaborate upon when I was really drunk. And so I would get drunk, I'd get angry, and she would get the brunt of it. And so one night, it was I think it was the 26th of December, 2007. I got myself into an amazing state. She found me, this is for what she told me. I was on the back deck screaming at the barbecue. Something about the band was in the barbecue and I needed to do something. From there, my anger went into the kitchen where I kicked and did something to the refrigerator, which actually caused it to break. We had to buy a new refrigerator. I was like just not myself. I was really just totally out there and just out of control. She was scared. And so the next thing the thing that I'm aware of is actually the next morning waking up at my parents' house. So my wife had called my dad to say, you got to come get him. He's out of control and I'm scared. My dad came and got me. I was driven to his house where I woke up the next morning. Now, this, in the way that we're telling this tale tonight, this is kind of a big dramatic thing that maybe seems to come out of nowhere. But there had been, as you might imagine, a lot of things that sort of hinted that this was coming. There were company Christmas parties where I would get completely wasted on, my 8 martini or 8 vodka martinis or whatever crazy things I was drinking. And, sometimes I would be found throwing up in the bathroom. And so there was definitely an escalation. And so this particular night, it had just gotten out of control. So the next day we sat down as a family. I kind of realized that I had finally really screwed up big time. And so we had a big sit down as a family, and I told them, I am going to go to rehab. I understand that this is out of control. I need help. I can't stop. And so I made an appointment to go to a treatment facility in the Seattle area. And actually, the very next day, the 27th of December is when I checked in. So I was almost forced by circumstance to get myself checked into a rehabilitation hospital, although it was something that I had seen coming for a while. I actually have memories of like driving at night and listening to the radio, and there'd be these commercials for this one facility that had come on the radio. And I always felt like the advertisement guy was talking to me. Like he's not just talking to the world in general. He's saying, Wes, you have a drinking problem. You need to come here. You need to get help. And so I would just get so mad at those ads and various things like that. I just always knew this was coming. So when it finally did happen, I made this appointment. So the facility that I went to is a bit, it's well known in the Seattle area. And it's not a 12-step program. It's a 10-day, very intensive program that features this sort of, it's a system where they basically fill you with alcohol, make you really, really sick. and to the point where you're just, getting sick all over the place. And then they use that very sick feeling as an aversion, so that you do not want to participate in any alcohol anymore.
So
Actually,
so that's aversion therapy.
Aversion therapy,
Also
yeah,
known
that's
as Clockwork Orange therapy.
Yeah, so
where they literally tape your eyes open and make you look at people killing each other. That's basically how it works, right? The way it does in the movies.
pretty much exactly like that. It's a 10-day program, and I knew at the very beginning that by the end of day 10, I wouldn't remember day 1, because I just knew that it was going to be a pretty intense thing. So I started to take notes at the very beginning, and I started writing a blog about the experience that was originally just going to be just for me, so I could remember. A few days in, I decided that my dad would probably like to hear what's happening to me inside this hospital, so I shared the link with him. And then towards later in the stay, I even realized that other patients would probably like to hear some of the stuff that I'm experiencing and writing about. So the blog became increasingly public, and today I don't hide it from anybody. It's out there, and it's been 7-something years. The whole journey through this treatment thing was just quite dramatic. We don't need to dwell on all the details of how that worked there, but I got out of the hospital, 10 days later, or maybe there was a couple days of detox in there. So anyway, a couple weeks later, let's just say I got out. I'm lucky to say that their system worked very well for me. They claim a pretty high success rate, and I'm one of the people who it has worked well for. I know that before I went into treatment, back when drinking was my most important thing in my life, I would often drink. It's like on the way home from somewhere I was driving to, or I would even get off work and be like, I'm not ready to go deal with home life yet. I think I'll go drive around for a couple of hours. But of course, that meant driving around with some beers for a couple of hours. So I had this whole drinking and driving thing down, and it was something that it wasn't even a question to me of like, is this safe or is it legal? That doesn't even matter. It was just something that I did. It was just ingrained in me. But that kind of came into focus as I left the hospital, because I was driving home and I stopped at a 7-Eleven to get something to drink. And I walked in, I went to the water section, bought myself a bottle of water, walked out, paid, and left. And as I got into my car, I realized, whoa, I didn't even look at the beer section. Like, it didn't even occur to me. And that was a major step in my life, because I was a changed person from what I had been just a couple of weeks before that. But that marked the beginning of a new phase in my life. And as we said, I was pretty heavy when I went into the hospital. I don't remember how much weight I lost during it. I'm sure there must have been some, but I pretty quickly started to track my weight. I'm not sure when, but somewhere in my life during this time, I'm pretty sure it happened before I went to the hospital, I had started tracking my weight as a means to try to lose it. I think about that sometimes when I think about you, because I know that in the Fitness and Post Challenge group, that was one of the big things that we started off with, hey, let's measure what's happening in our lives. And so I was measuring myself and tracking on a website that I believe is now defunct, but it was called Science Diet back then. It was created a graph automatically, which to me was magic, so that if you were doing well with your eating and your weight, you could watch this graph dive. But I was tracking things back then. So when I got out of the hospital, I was well in a position to be tracking my weight. So I'm out of the hospital. I'm no longer drinking alcohol, and I don't even want to, thankfully. But I do remember having a severe need for something sweet, some sugar, because I had taken a whole bunch of sugars out of my diet, like really quickly. And so back then I was eating a Ben and Jerry's pint of ice cream every single night. And yet I was still losing weight, and my chart was showing it. And eventually the ice cream slowed down, but within, I don't remember exactly now, but was because I can't access Science Diet anymore, but within like 6 months, I had lost like 40 pounds. Maybe it was a little bit longer, but I fairly quickly dropped 40 pounds from the 240 that I had been at my heaviest. And that was primarily just from reducing my intake by no longer drinking so much alcohol, or not drinking any alcohol. So the alcohol was such a huge, enormous injection of calories that once I took that out, I just naturally just lost tons and tons of weight. And I wasn't doing any exercise, or maybe I was doing some, but it wasn't of anything worth talking about now. But it was just that reduction in intake that made such a huge difference. So that, years later, I think it was 2011, I can remember, was when I actually got myself a Wi-Fi enable scale that made it much easier to do all this stuff. I was in a much better position as I was much, much, much lighter. That's kind of the major first thing for me, and a huge amount of weight loss just came from making that first step towards getting healthy, which for me was the very important thing to stop drinking.
Well, the most exciting thing about this conversation is that you and I are going to be billionaires because we've just discovered the best diet program ever, which is eat a pint of Ben & Jerry's every night for 6 months and lose 40 pounds. We're going to make millions of dollars off of this program.
What can go wrong?
Right? I mean, but really what that shows, all kidding aside, is just the amazing impact that drinking alcohol regularly can have just on your weight. There's so many other things that it can affect and snowball as far as cognitive function. And obviously the drinking and the driving is just that can just spiral way out of control and ruin your life and ruin other people's lives. But just narrowing it down just to pure caloric intake and the immense effect that it had on your body, to the point where you were eating a pint of ice cream every night and still losing 40 pounds. If that doesn't give a wake-up call, at least to a few people, I don't know what will, because that to me is just profound.
I think at the time it kind of blew my mind. Like, what secret magic have I discovered? This should not happen this way. But at the same time, I wasn't really questioning it. It was kind of one of these things where it's like, hey, I feel like I need a pint of ice cream tonight. I'm going to grant myself that because it's a lot healthier than the alternative that I was doing a couple of months ago. So let's just work through this, and eventually I'll get to the point where I don't need that ice cream every night. And yeah, in fact, I still love Ben & Jerry's ice cream, don't get me wrong, but I cannot eat a whole pint now.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
Even if I wanted to, I couldn't do it.
So you basically went through your own version of aversion therapy, basically with the Ben & Jerry's. But what I do want to point out, which you've already kind of pointed out, is just the importance of quantification. And yes, this was the cornerstone of the challenge groups that I was running, and for the courses that I'm building now, which will be much more self-sufficient and be able to last longer and have a longer shelf life than the challenge groups. The biggest thing that I would always say is what you measure you can improve upon. Because if you don't have a baseline, you don't have an understanding of what you're doing now, you have no idea how to make changes that will positively affect it. And like you said, one of the things you pointed out that I think was so profound, and most people may not pick up on it, is that part of the reason that you were motivated to lose the weight is because you like watching the little bar graph or the little graph go down, right? It's a really, really simple thing, but that's called a habit loop, where the cue is you weigh yourself, you see the line go down, and then that's the reward. So now you're going to continue doing the routines, whether it be the exercise, the changing of the eating habits, whatever it is. That's the routine that you put into the habit loop, and then your reward is, oh, cool, my graph is going down, right? It's really, really small, and it's not the kind of thing that anybody would think would lead to lasting change. But having that quantification can literally be the difference between not going anywhere or making profound changes in your life. And even the ice cream, again, is you're not eliminating the habit out of your life of doing, like you were doing the drinking before. So something would cue you to say, I need to take a drink. The routine would be the drink. And then the reward would be you feel the release of anxiety. You feel less pressure. You can deal with your family. You can deal with work stress. And you kept the habit loop, but you changed the routine. And instead of doing the alcohol, you did the ice cream. And obviously now you've eradicated that. My guess is there might still be something that's in that place, but it's obviously immensely healthier. And that's kind of where I want to go to next, because I really believe that when you dissect this journey, and this is not a journey that you and I had even talked about, so I had no level of preparation whatsoever. I frankly didn't even know most of this, so I'm even more impressed than I was an hour ago when we started. I think now you still have a very, very similar habit loop, But now the alcohol that became the ice cream has now become athletics, and you've kind of gone back to where everything started in high school. So now I want to jump to a couple of days ago, and then I want to fill the gap between right after you got out of rehab to how you got where you are now. But let's tell the audience, what was it that you just finished doing a couple of days ago?
Yeah, on Saturday, October 3rd, I completed my first ultra marathon and ran a 50-kilometer race up north of Seattle called the Baker Lake 50K. And I finished it, and it wasn't easy. My time was 6 hours and 13 minutes, which for my first 50K is not terrible. And it was a remarkable thing. I can't believe I can actually say to you and to your audience, like, I am now an ultra marathon runner.
Yeah, so for anybody that's listening right now thinking, I just don't know if I can get up and exercise or do this and that, it's too hard. Like, your excuse is no longer valid. Like, seriously, this guy was practically rolled into rehab, 240 pounds, and you just ran a 50K in 6 hours. Like, that's astounding. So I really wanted to bring that up to people that really feel like, oh, I just can't do it, or it's too much, or it's too overwhelming. If I'd said to you in 2007, a week after you got out of rehab, hey, Wes, I want you to run a 50K, what would your response have been?
Well, my first response would have been the same one that everyone else says to me, which is, how long is 50K? And then somebody would have said, oh, it's 31.1 miles. And then I would have said, you're crazy.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what people do when they look at these goals. They say, I'm 240 pounds, and there's this guy that was on this podcast. He just ran a 50K, but that's not me. I can't do that. But what I'm trying to help people understand is that you absolutely can do it, but you have to break your goal into much smaller pieces, right? And this all comes from the Go Far framework that I have learned through the documentary film that I worked on called Go Far, and through the program itself. But step one, when you create a goal, is that you have to take your ultimate goal and break it down into a series of much smaller ones. So let's go back to this point where you no longer were drinking alcohol and you said, I want to start moving forwards. Let's go through some of the baby steps, some of the changes that got you from that point to being able to run a 50K.
Yeah. So we've already talked about how I got down to about 200 pounds. In 2011, I so I started losing more weight in 2011. And in the beginning of right around that time, beginning of 2012, I was now down to, like, I can't remember. I could probably check on a graph somewhere, but I was now down to like 180, around in there. I had lost some more weight, and I was starting to get interested in exercising because I could tell that my body movements were easier to accomplish. It was just easier to move, and so I started just doing some simple jogging. By early 2012, I was working at Adobe Systems, and so Automatic Duck had licensed some technology to Adobe. I went to go work for them, and a very good friend of mine who I've been friends with since the mid-90s, he also works at Adobe. He showed me actually, I think how did he show it to me? I have to go back in time. I had seen a GPS track, like on Facebook or something, of a jog he had done. And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. I like seeing where he ran on a map and GPS. And Zach, you've already mentioned I'm a technology guy. So I kind of got interested in this shiny object that he's talking about and this GPS thing. So I said, how did you do that? So he told me about his Garmin GPS watch. And that he had then uploaded the GPS information to this website called Strava, which is it's like a social network for exercising, running, and biking. And I was like, to me, that was very interesting. And just this technological piece of tracking the run in a way that to me was really beautiful, and seeing it on the map was intriguing. And so I decided that, if nothing else, this is going to be a carrot that I can hold out in front of me as I run. This is going to be the little thing that's going to motivate me, because I like these kinds of technological solutions and ways to make my life more interesting. So I bought myself a Garmin watch, and I started to do a little bit of running. And it was all very, very low key. I mean, I think I was running maybe a mile, maybe two. I can remember this one 2 mile stretch that I would, or it's 1 mile out and 1 mile back, that I would, run to a telephone pole and then walk 2 telephone poles and then then run to the next telephone pole and then walk a little bit more. So I started off just barely running at all, and then over time increased it. But this whole idea of tracking it made it so interesting to me and gave me just so much more motivation. And it was a real slow thing. I mean, I didn't have much in the way of goals except that I just wanted to be able to run and have it not hurt, and I wanted it to actually be fun. And so I was just kind of going slowly, adding miles over months. I mean, it was such a slow progression that I was running just 5Ks, which is 3 miles, and feeling really, really good about that accomplishment, and not necessarily looking too much beyond that. And I had worked my way up to, in the summer of 2014, I had worked my way up to running like 5 miles, and I was like king of the world that I could run 5 miles. I couldn't believe the achievement that was. And then one day I happened to be traveling in Portland, Oregon, and I went for a 5 mile run, but I don't know if I was too ambitious about a turn that I took or if I took a wrong turn, but I ended up running a 7 mile loop. And I did it successfully, and I didn't feel really that bad, but I posted the link to the Strava GPS track of that run to Facebook. And a very good friend of mine saw that in September of 2014, and she said, "Hey, if you can run 7 miles, you can run a half marathon. And I've got a half marathon coming up in November. Maybe you can run it with me." And, kind of thinking back to it now, my memory was that I kind of jumped on it. Like, yes, I need that kind of motivation. Now, I had to have been scared because, I mean, 7 miles was a long way for me to go. And to tack on 6 more miles to go 13 for a half marathon, that, in retrospect, that seems kind of crazy. But I took the motivation and started to train specifically with a goal in mind. So up until that point, I had just been sort of running, just going 2, 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, just kind of whatever felt right. But starting with that email conversation with my friend, that set me on a clear path. So I found I went to halhigdon.com, which is a very popular site for marathon and half marathon training plans. Printed out a plan to get me to a half marathon by whatever date it was in November of 2014. Worked my way to the point where I flew down to Berkeley with my friend and ran the Berkeley half marathon in last November, which, crap, that wasn't even a year ago. And that was an amazing experience, actually. It wasn't super successful. I didn't know anything about proper nutrition. I didn't know anything about hydration. So I got up that morning. I did not eat any breakfast. I ran the race, did not fuel during the race with any of the various caloric things that they have now, the gels and the goos. I didn't eat any of that. I had a little bit of water at the various water stations, but not a lot. And so, needless to say, at mile 11, I just totally hit a wall and ran out of energy. And I also had been, of course, it was a race environment, so I had run too quickly the first part of the race. But it was a neat learning experience. I mean, I still managed to finish. It was very difficult to get those last 2 miles in. Afterwards, I can remember I was crying. I was just so full of emotion. Like, I can't believe I just ran a half marathon. I can't believe it. Just a couple of months ago, I ran 7 miles, and that was the farthest I could ever go. It was a really special experience, but it was also a learning experience because I knew that I could have done better if I would have known more about how to properly give my body the fuel that it needed. And so, let's see, actually, that was right around the same time as we had completed your Fitness and Post challenge group.
Which, by the way, I didn't even mention, but as you were recalling the story, it all came back to me. You won that challenge group. And now I know how you did it because it was based largely on activity and, sticking with specific goals. And now I can see how you got so many steps and so much activity because you were running half marathons.
Well, I was training for that half marathon. And then so it was just a remarkable experience, but it taught me that, hey, that not only was that fun, but I could do better if I learned and did things right. I also, the challenge experience, the challenge group experience, the thing I remember telling you that it was the most useful thing for that to me, or that I took away from it so immediately, was a sense of confidence, because I didn't really have any confidence going into your group about my fitness level, like how I stacked up against others, or where did I fit. But through your challenge group, I got this confidence that, wow, I am fit. I can stand up against other people who are also fit. I don't have to be scared of people who know what they're doing. So, so right after that half marathon, and with the confidence of your class, I joined a fitness group here in town that does like a morning 5 a.m. boot camp thing, and that was great because I started to meet new people. I met some people there who liked running and who also liked trail running, which is also something that I had expressed interest in. I didn't know much about, but they were like, "Oh, you like trail running? Come running with us." So I started running some trails with some people, and so I think it was by was it December? I don't know the dates anymore, but it wasn't too long after that I ran my first half marathon on a trail, which is a completely different experience than running a road half marathon. Um, and then I think it was within 6 months, I did three more half marathons. So by July of 2015, I had gotten five half marathons under my belt, three of them on the trail, two of them on the road, and was just feeling like really, really just good. I was feeling confident and proud of myself, and excited about what I was experiencing, and yet constantly being challenged to do more. And so along the way, I had all these new people who I'm hanging out with. They are not only running half marathons, but they're running marathons. I have some friends that in November, they do back-to-back marathons where they do one Seattle marathon on Saturday, then on the very next day, they do another Seattle marathon. In July, a bunch of these friends, they ran a 50-mile race, and I was just so inspired, and I wanted to do that too. So that's when sometime over the summer, I can't remember exactly when, but I had finally committed and put down my money for this Baker Lake 50K, which just happened. And so then I started to train specifically for that. Again, using some sort of plan, not trying to go 31 miles all at once, but just taking it easy. And, one day it's 2 miles, and then 4 miles, and then it's 6 miles. And then on the weekend, I have to do a long 8-mile run. Now, of course, I'm to the point where a half marathon is something that I'm used to. So those numbers didn't scare me, but I did have to eventually build that up and build that up. So yeah, you make the comment that anybody can do it, and it's true, but you do have to sort of take it, like you say, and you have to break down the goal. So it was really helpful for me, and I found that by having a plan and sticking to some sort of schedule, that it was easy to add those miles on. It's still, these sorts of distances are not easy. My experience on Saturday at the race was the first half, the first 15 miles was it felt really good. I was running with this guy who he and I have trained together a bunch, and we're running probably a little bit faster than we should have, but it just felt so good. We were running with other people, and one of the things that's really fun about a trail run is that, at least in my experience, they tend to be more social than road races. So, we're talking to the girls who are running up ahead of us, and talking to the people behind us, and we're just talking and running. But when I got to the aid station at mile 15, I stopped I wanted to change my shirt. I wanted to change my socks, and I ended up changing my shoes just because why not? And got some food in me and some stuff, but my legs started to cramp up, which was a new experience. I hadn't had that before. But then, unfortunately, the whole second half of the race, the last 15 miles, my legs just were cramping and hurting so bad. And then it just became it was just a mental thing to just push past it, to keep going. Part of it was, I thought to myself, well, on Tuesday night, I'm talking to Zach, And I can go on the podcast and tell them that I finished the race, or I can go on the podcast and tell them that I didn't finish. So I'm going to keep on going. So this conversation we're having right now was definitely a motivating factor.
Well, I'm glad that I could be a contributor to giving you that level of accountability and making you that much more miserable.
Yeah,
but
that's the story.
Well, it's a really, really inspiring story, and I think that one of the things that it certainly brings up that I think is a mental barrier for so many people, especially when they're in the place right now where you were 7-8 years ago, is saying, well, my body's just not capable of these things. And what people really need to understand, and it's one thing to know the information and see the science, and it's another to have to experience it, but your body is capable of 100 times more than you think that it is. What's stopping you from doing the things that you think you can't do is your mind. It's all mental. And in your mind, you were thinking, well, I'm at mile 15 and I'm only halfway done and I'm already in pain and I'm already cramping. And you're thinking, well, my body just can't do it. Like my legs can't do it. My legs hurt. I can't deal with the pain. But once you kind of dialed into the mental side of it, you were able to get through. And I'm guessing my assumption would be that as soon as you hit mile 31 and as soon as you hit the finish line, that was it. Your body just gave out and was done and said, I can't do another 1/10 of a mile. Would that be a fairly accurate assessment?
It was pretty close to that. I was surprised at the finish line by my parents, which was a really nice special thing for someone to be there for me. My dad shot some video of me coming across the finish line, and I was looking at it, and I looked strong. I mean, I was coming in quick. I was pushing it. I came into the finish, and then, I can remember then when they came over to greet me, and I'm like talking to people that I could then barely stand. And so I actually went and found a place to sit down, and my legs were shaking, and I was shaking. And it was, I later did try to get up and move around a little bit, but I was moving so slow. Yeah, my body after mile 31, when I crossed the finish line, it was like, yeah, we're going to stop now.
And the amazing thing is that it really wasn't, I mean, yes, it was your body and your body was tired. But if you had said, well, I know that it's 36 miles, your body would have gone to 36.1 miles and it would have collapsed. If you were doing a double marathon, you would have gotten to whatever it is, 52 point, whatever, 54, whatever the number is. I'm not good at math. That's why I'm an editor. But whatever that number is, you would have gotten to that point and then you would have collapsed. So really is so much more mental than it is physical.
Absolutely. Because you have that in your head. This is the finish line, so I can be done now.
Exactly. So that's really what I want to get to, is that it's all about you telling yourself what the finish line is and it being so much a mental game, where if you're saying my finish line, and this is the more common mentality in just kind of the fitness space or the exercise space, just the common societal mentality is, well, in 90 days, my waist has to be at this size and I want to lose this many pounds and I want to see this on the scale. But if they're not getting immediate results and rewards, it's like, well, I can never do that. I'm not capable of it, right? There's just something about me that's different, and I'm just failing and I can't get there. But it's all about finding the mental barriers that you need to get over. And you knew that I had to get to 31 miles, and your body, you could have done double, right? With the shape that you're in, you could have done double the mileage, but your mile said at 31, I'm done. So your body collapsed and it was finished, right? But it's all about the mental barrier. And I think that the other thing that I really want to get into, and I know that we're getting close to the end, but if the show goes long, I'm totally fine with that. But I think that the other component of this that I really want to dial into is we've talked about how you got to this place because you had a specific goal and it was based on accountability. Because up until you started getting into the half marathons, you were just kind of dabbling and saying, oh, I'm starting to feel better. My body's starting to feel like it's moving easier. I'm enjoying this, right? I like the carrot of seeing the graphs and the little things of me running around town. But it was the accountability factor that got you to take it to the next level. So that's one of the major components of trying to find lifestyle changes that fit, as opposed to I'm going to do this crash course diet or exercise program. It's finding that long-term thing that's going to make it stick. But the thing that does that is the accountability. But the other component that I want to talk about a little bit and really drill down even deeper is that if you don't have a why, you're not going to stick to it either. And if your why is you want a thinner waistline and you want the number on the scale to be down, there's a 96% chance that you're going to fail. But your why, I'm guessing, was much different based on your past experience. So when you started dabbling or you started to push into these races, what is the deeper why where you woke up and said, this is why I'm choosing to do this today?
Oh, well, I haven't really thought about that, Zach. Well, early on, my why was the waistline. I had lost a bunch of weight. I wanted to lose more. I can remember sort of starving myself and watching the scale recording dip down, watching the graph go down and feeling really good about that. It's like, oh, I may not have eaten today, but I lost weight, and that's even more important. And I know, I realize now that that's not healthy, but at the time I was thinking that way. And of course, the downside to that was that anytime then I would eat, my weight would then go back up a few pounds, and I would feel terrible about myself. Since I've been so much more active and had this much more proactive plan for just overall health, my weight kind of fluctuates, but at the same time, it's generally in the same, like within the 5 pounds of itself, just because I just find I'm so much more healthy and I'm eating healthier, everything about that, what I'm trying to do. I'm not even necessarily having to try to want it. I want to be healthy. Somehow it's just my brain is just as something else, a different switch is on or something. But I think that once I had decided I wanted to do these longer runs, I really felt a compulsion that I needed to do it, and I don't know that I can explain it in any way that makes more sense than just I felt a drive, and the more I looked into the racing, these very long runs, it just felt like, oh, that's the thing that I need to do. Like it just felt so comfortable. And so I just sort of continued on the path to seeking that because it felt I was being drawn towards it.
Well, let me try and drill down even one level deeper. And I might be putting words into your mouth. And if I am, you can stop me and say that I'm totally wrong. But I'm gonna try and drill down one level even deeper, because this is really one of the core components of what I try to do in the challenge groups and what I'm really going to be doing in the courses that I'm going to create for people in the industry to instill these habits is. You talk back to your story that you had in 2007, where it was Christmas, or it was the day after Christmas, and you scared your wife and you scared your family. But one component that you haven't talked about yet at all that I know exists in your life is that you have a daughter.
Yes, that's right. I do.
So I'm guessing, and again, if I'm putting words in your mouth, you can stop me, but I'm guessing that after having been through that in 2007 and seeing the person that you were, there's a component of this that is, I have to be a responsible father and I have to be a role model. And you may not have sat down and said, all right, I'm going to plan out the next 7 years of my life. And one of my goals is that I would like to be a more responsible father and a better role model to my daughter, right? But I'm guessing that that is one of the strongest and, a very driving force in the decisions that you're making, even if you haven't consciously made it. Because I would guess that there's a part of you that's saying, well, whatever it was that happened in 2007, I don't want anybody in my family, especially my daughter, to ever go through that again.
Yeah, she is a major source of inspiration for me now. And you're right. I do so much, or when I do these things today, part of it is so that I can show her through example what is possible, physically, fitness-wise, or setting your mind to something, having a goal. I want her to see a healthy lifestyle that is not only healthy and that's a reward, but is also fun outside of the health rewards of it. And just because I know that so many times people, they like to poo-poo health things as, oh, well, that's not very fun. Well, actually, it can be a lot of fun. And so, yeah, I wanted her to see all the good stuff that I'm getting out of it, and I want to inspire her. And yeah, I never want her to have to go through the pain that I had to go through in the past. So hopefully my having lived that can hopefully shy her away from it. But yeah, I want to create for her, or I want to show her a better way.
Yeah, and I think that it's so important for people to be willing to really sit down and ask themselves those harder questions. And that's one of the things that really got me to the point where I am and where I continue to go, is I stopped thinking about the short-term gains and, ooh, I want this, or ooh, I want that. It was, what is my really, really deep why? And this is something that I learned about partly from a lot of psychological study and research that I've done, but also from Tony Horton, who everybody thinks is just the crazy fitness guy that does P90X and does all the goofy jokes and whatnot. But he's a brilliant man, and he really knows what he's doing. He just does it in a very fun, lighthearted discarded digestible form, which I think to his detriment makes it harder for some people to take him seriously, which I think it's unfortunate for him in that sense, but he's also immensely successful with these programs. But when you really start to talk to the guy or you read his book, you realize that he goes much, much deeper into the psychology of why people are successful or not successful with their exercise programs, with their diets, with their lifestyle changes. And it's not because of the choice of the diet. It's not because of the amount of calories they eat. It's not because they do a certain number of jumping jacks. It's because they find their purpose. They find their why. And once you can establish that, everything else starts to click into place. I had given this example, I think, just on the previous show or the one before that. But I've become a morning person. I've never been a morning person my entire life. But I now wake up pretty regularly around 5:30 a.m. with or without an alarm clock. Feel great, wake up, do exercise, get tons of stuff done even before my daughter wakes up and my day starts. But the thing that got me to do it after not being a morning person my whole life was saying, I want to be able to wake up and I want to be able to give my son a hug before my wife takes him to school. That was it. So anytime that I feel like I'm going to sleep in or like, oh God, I'm so tired, I just want to hit the snooze button, I think to myself, my son is not going to be 5 years old for that much longer. And when he wakes up in the morning, I want to be there to give him a hug, to say goodbye. And that's it. But it's such a powerful motivator. And I think it's important for anybody listening saying, well, I just don't know where to get started. I don't know what program to choose. I don't want to do a diet. Don't worry about any of that. Just find your why, find your purpose, and then all of a sudden your decisions will start to be shaped by that subconscious why that you're starting to put into your brain. So if people are listening saying, oh my God, where he was in 2007, that's kind of where I am now, but how in the world am I going to run a 50K race? Start with your why. Just find your reason to get started, and then things will start to fall into place. And I think it's great that we got to be able to kind of drill down and do it and even help you discover what that why was that maybe you weren't even consciously thinking about. But there's no question in my mind, and hopefully not in yours either, that a lot of your why had nothing to do with scales or graphs or races or anything else.
Yeah, and it's in my daughter is 12 years old now. She's in seventh grade, and she's in this accelerated growing up program where she wants to be 21 tomorrow. And so, I'm conscious of how every moment I'm with her is a moment that I'm never going to have again. And it's just going by so fast. So first of all, I'm jealous of your 5-year-old. That's such a wonderful age, and you have time still. But even my daughter, we still have time left together. It's happening so fast. So anything that I can do to be there for her and to create a situation where we are happy and she's growing up healthy and I can motivate her and inspire her as her father, that's the life that I want.
Yeah, exactly. And like another perfect example of how one can apply this to just an everyday thing. Like, for example, I recently sent out a survey to everybody on my mailing list and online that's interested in fitness and post. And I said, what's your greatest challenge working in post-production and trying to stay healthy? And one of the more unanimous responses was, how the heck do I stop snacking? Like, all the food they provide is such crap and there's junk everywhere and everybody's having Red Bull and, soda and M&Ms. Like, I don't know how to stop. What's the trick, right? And everybody thinks that it's some specific diet program or it's deprivation or it's willpower. My why, the reason that I don't have chips all day long or I don't have a candy bar or whatever it is because when I do and I get home, I'm cranky with my kids and I'm impatient with them and my blood sugar has plummeted and I don't treat them nicely, and they don't deserve that. They're kids. They're 3 and they're 5, and they don't deserve to be treated the way that I can get when I eat crap and I'm really exhausted and I'm just at the end of my rope. And what gets me there faster than anything is eating junk. So I'm not using willpower and not saying, oh, I really want the cookie, but I just can't eat the cookie. I'm saying, all right, I want the cookie, but let's think about in my mind in a few hours, what are the consequences of that? I'm going to eat the cookie. I'm going to go home. I'm going to see my kids, and I'm not going to be a good dad. That makes it so much easier to not grab that cookie just because I've created the why, and it's not using some crazy technology. It's not using deprivation diets. It's just finding the why, and that's what drives so many of my decisions. So that's really what I want people to take away from your story. And there are so many things they can take away from your story, but I think the part of it is just establishing the bigger reason why you want to make the changes that you do, and that's going to drive all of the tiny habits and decisions that you make all day long.
Yeah, well, I'm so blessed to be able to have gone through the journey that I have, and I always hope that whether it's my drinking, which then I was able to get out of, if that can inspire someone, or if it's my journey to this new thing of endurance running, um, you know, I feel so blessed that I can have an impact on other folks. And I can't believe that of all the people in the world, Zach, that I have inspired you to get me on your show. I mean, that's a real honor. I'm really grateful that you've invited me. This is real quite cool.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no question that the inspiration is like 98% one way right now. It's all coming from your microphone to my ears. So I'm listening to your story and I'm saying, man, I didn't do the Spartan World Championships this year, and now I feel really guilty about it because that's only like 15 miles. Yes, it's was at 10,000 feet elevation and there's 25 or 30 obstacles and there's barbed wire and such. But now I listen to your story and I'm like, why I could have done that, right? So yes, your story is really inspiring, and now I hope you know that the journey you've been through, whether it was difficult, impossible, not impossible, other people are going to listen to it and it can make actual changes in their lives, and then it can start to snowball for others. So that's really why I wanted to do this more than anything. So I'm glad that we were able to share this time together and get your story out there.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. Yeah, this is really great.
Thank you for listening to episode 53 of the Fitness in Post podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to access any of the resources discussed, visit our show notes at fitnessinpost.com/53. If you're looking for ways to get more motivated to be more active at the office or elsewhere, I highly suggest that you check out our Fitness in Post Fitbit leaderboard, which now has almost 200 members. All you need to do is track your activity to win great prizes from our awesome sponsors, which include Adobe, Boris Effects, which now includes Mocha, Gen Arts, the creator of the Sapphire plugin package, G-Tech, Calton Nutrition, Isotope, and That Studio. To learn more, just visit fitnessinpost.com/Fitbit. Lastly, if you haven't checked it out yet, I highly recommend a visit to the Fitness in Post store, where we have listed all the products and resources that we use on a regular basis that help us to not only survive this industry, but thrive. To see all the great stuff that we recommend, including exercise equipment for the office, supplements, books and movies, and many other items, just visit store.fitnessinpost.com. Thank you for listening. Be well.